Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Balanced Approach podcast. I hope that you are well and enjoying these episodes and this mini-series on my 3-step system to effective weight loss. This is part 3 of 3, so thank you for sticking with me, where we bring together all things fat loss and weight loss for you. And as I've said, it was important to cover all 3 parts of this in a bit more depth, as I believe this will take you to 90-95% of what you need to achieve for your weight loss goals. So far we have covered what calories are, calorie deficits, and why they are important for you to know about, and different ways to measure, monitor and manage your energy intake and output for weight loss. As I've said, there's a lot to cover in these episodes. That's why I thought it was important and useful to cover them in such depth, but they will kickstart your weight loss and fat loss and hopefully allow you to keep your results long term. So today we finally bring together what we've covered in the energy inside of things, measuring, monitoring and managing consistently, and the way that works for us with calories, portions, food diaries, etc. We've also covered, and we're going to bring together, the energy outside of the equation. So what you're measuring with regards to your activity, your fitness trackers, healthy habits and general all-round activity. And now we're looking at the outcome side of that. So when we're looking at a calorie deficit, it's energy in versus energy out, and then our impact on our weight. So today we're looking at the outcome and ways to measure, monitor and manage that with regards to your body weight, and obviously having a look at the better and worse ways to do that, other things that you might want to consider as well, as that could be really important in having sustainable and healthy results long term. We'll be covering quite a few questions which we'll dip in and out of as we go, and the way that I've structured this episode is actually based around common questions around weighing yourself and how to monitor progress. So the first question that commonly comes up is, when should you weigh yourself, or how should you weigh yourself? So using a set of scales on sort of a hard floor, which allows them to predict weight effectively, not on carpet ideally. But ideally we want the same conditions to give consistent and more reliable results. This is what's infuriating when people are weighing in different places. It's not very consistent in different times of day especially. So one thing that I would say is that if you do it first thing in the morning, after you've been to the toilet, wearing the same clothing each time. If you don't wear anything, that's completely fine, that's up to you. Some people feel a bit more comfortable wearing something, but just making sure if you are trying to wear that each time you're weighing. The reason I suggest this, as throughout the day, lots of things such as eating, drinking, movement can impact the scales, but not necessarily our fat stores, which is what we're trying to actually reduce in the long term. Not just our body weight, but actually our body fat. So this will allow us to have more measurements that are comparable. So having the same conditions allows us to see, right, so when I did this at the start of the week, I was this weight, and I did the exact same process at the end of the week or next week or a couple of weeks later, and this was the outcome. So I can compare that data rather than going, well, this time I was weighed in the morning versus this time I was weighed in the afternoon after eating 2 meals. This time I'd gone for a walk just before and I hadn't eaten anything. It can give us a lot more variables that we can actually take away. So it's really useful to have that consistency with your measurements long term. The next question I often get asked is, how often should you weigh yourself? First of all, this completely depends on your relationship with the scales. If you feel that you've got a poor relationship with the weighing scales, then we might need to reevaluate your goals and what we're actually trying to achieve, because actually resolving that before bringing in that tool is more important. If we start bringing in scales more consistently and you don't feel that you've got a positive relationship with them, then we could just be fueling that to really spiral, and we don't really want that long term. However, if that's not an issue for you, I'd suggest couple of days, most days during the week. One of the biggest issues I see with slimming groups in general is that they use one weigh or one body weight measurement a week after a full day of food, or people might be starving themselves in the morning, which again is sort of like a dehydration or having less food in them, can impact the scales, which you know, but actually when we look at their body fat levels, they'll be pretty similar throughout the day, as it sort of takes a long time for body fat levels to change across a week, across a couple of weeks in particular. So it's poor measurements done inconsistently, because people might turn to different groups, haven't done at different times, they might not be on a hard floor, they might be wearing different clothing, which means that we can't really get much data from them, or much reliable data in particular, to know whether what we're doing is actually working. With regular morning measurements at consistent times, using consistent variables, being consistent with as much as we can, you get more accurate data, which allows us to make more informed choices and actually know whether what we're doing is actually having the effect that we want long term. One key thing to remember is that the purpose of more regular weighing isn't to see big drops day to day, and actually we'll probably see the scale go up and down. So again, this is why I mentioned about having a positive relationship with the scale. We don't want to get too attached to that number, and actually what we're trying to see over a longer period of time with more data, more consistent data, is a trend. We're not looking at day-to-day fluctuations or across a couple of days. With the more consistent data and variables that we've got more control over, we'll be able to see what we're doing and how that's impacting over a longer period of time, rather than just one data point each week, which a lot of things can influence, especially if we're doing them later in the day, and a lot more things that can influence that number on the scale that isn't necessarily impacting our weight. So how quickly should you be looking to lose weight? Now, I don't want to underwhelm you, but I'd probably suggest 1 to 2 pounds a week on average. When I lost my 66 pounds and kept it off, it was over a case of like 3 years. And when I actually looked at the data and done an average over time, I was probably averaging less than half a pound every fortnight, because life was happening and there's times where I was losing weight and maintaining, slightly going up, and all those types. I know some people might go, well, at Slimming World or at Weight Watchers, we lose 7 pounds, 4 pounds, anything like that over a long period of time. Well, actually, they aren't consistent often. People have big drop-offs 1 week and then they might gain and up and down. And actually, a lot of that won't be body fat change. A lot of that will be water weight. I've seen instances where actually someone lost, or they, under medical supervision, lost 24 pounds in 24 hours. And that was mainly done by dehydration. Not body fat loss, not changes to actual fat stores, but just dehydration and using things like saunas, exercise, heat, just to get that water out. So actually, when we're looking at trying to improve health, you starving yourself all day, taking laxatives, and then potentially having a big celebratory meal aren't healthy habits that we want to encourage long term. And one of the cycles I actually often see is that people say they have a weigh-in on a Monday, in the afternoon, in the evening, they will have a weekend where they overindulge potentially, then it'll get to Sunday night and they're worried about their weighing tomorrow. They won't eat all Monday, they might not drink anything either, just to get their body weight down, not necessarily impact their fat stores. And then if they've lost weight, it's a big meal, potentially quote unquote a binge. Or if they've not lost weight, then it's a commiseration meal afterwards as well. And that's sort of mimicking that binge restrict cycle, which we know long term isn't healthy, and actually is associated with weight cycling, where people's weight drop and go up, go up and go up. So we want to avoid that, and one of the things I'd ask you to do is to try and disassociate your success with just using the scales, and we'll talk about that in a minute, about all the different things that we can measure alongside the scales to get a better, more rounded and holistic and healthy view of how progress is going. And lastly, just to round off this section, is that if you are looking to go really hard in an unsustainable way with regards to your dieting and exercise, you probably won't go for long. Therefore, you probably won't maintain those results, because the things that you're doing, you're probably not willing to do long term in order to maintain those results. If you are looking to lose weight and keep it off, this takes time. It takes building habits, it takes effort, and it takes you being more consistent and looking at things that you can do consistently long term. Slower weight loss is often less taxing, more sociable, and easier to maintain. So take that in mind. Don't think about the short-term sprint, think about the marathon, think about tortoise in the hare. Have the tortoise mentality. Have a tortoise mentality. But Louis, what if my weight isn't dropping? Well, I'd say give it 3 to 4 weeks of consistent effort, making sure that you're consistent with your monitoring and measuring your intake, measuring and monitoring your output as well, and your outcomes with regards to your weight, and we'll hope to see that weight drop in average. If there isn't a drop, then you're probably not in a calorie deficit. That might mean that we need to readjust and have a look at increasing your physical activity, or potentially reduce the amount of calories that you're consuming, and ensuring that those amounts, or that amount of physical activity and food or exercise, is sustainable for you, your lifestyle, your goals, and what you value. Because if it doesn't align with those things, then potentially you might have to look at a maintenance phase and having a look at future moves later on down the line. The reason I say consider is because if you're already feeling restricted with your food and are pretty active or highly active, I wouldn't suggest to keep pushing, as, like I said, if you're not maintaining the things that are getting you to this outcome, then you're probably not going to maintain the outcome long term as well. Another thing to consider as well, after all of this, might be that maybe it's not the right time to lose weight, or maybe weight loss isn't for you right now. And again, if you want to discuss that, you know where I am. Just reach out, as this can be quite a difficult thing to come to terms with, but can be the healthiest option for them long term and allow them to be happier day to day. So you may remember that I've mentioned there's other things potentially that are worth monitoring apart from your weight. So yes, other metric things. So when we're looking at metrics, looking at data, numbers and things. So the scale is a number. Another thing that I'd consider was taking some measurements, because it's good to see where things move. And often I find this really useful with clients, because their weight might be not changing or might be slowly progressing, but actually their measurements could be really, really moving quite quickly, and that could be really motivating with people. After that, I'd probably suggest measure what matters to you. And what do I mean by that? So common ones would be how clothes feel. So taking a certain outfit that you either enjoy or wear regularly, and every now and then just trying on, going, right, how does that feel? Maybe making a note of that so you can reflect on it next time as well. Common thing, energy levels. This is where sustainability wins hands down. If you're dropping your calories too low and over-exercising, usually your energy levels are through the floor as well. Having good energy levels while you're dieting can be a really positive outcome for a lot of people, where usually they've probably suffered through it, but actually if you can learn to enjoy, to improve your health and habits, actually it's just going to kick on even more and get better results for people. Sleep is super important. With one of my check-ins, one of my clients, I actually refer to as a superpower, and it definitely is. If you've got good sleep, you can achieve so much more in so many different aspects of your life, and your results are going to be so much better across the board. So monitoring your sleep. If your sleep's negatively impacted, again, if you're underfed and over-exercising, people's sleep tends to get disrupted. And if that starts to fall, then actually it makes everything so much harder and probably won't last very long. Another thing to measure would be your social life. So people might lock themselves away from what they currently do, or might change their lifestyle completely just for this 6, 12, 16 week sort of transformation or weight loss journey. Actually want to include the things that you enjoy doing, things that you're going to do after you've gone on your weight loss journey as well, because we need to, one, learn how to navigate and manage ourselves around it, but also enjoy the process. If you're just looking to suffer for suffer's sake, again, when we get to that goal, it's probably not going to be everything that you dreamed it would be, but also you're probably not going to stay there very long as well. Other things to look at are performance, and that just isn't with regards to sporting activity, but performance at work, performance in general, life with sort of admin, how you're managing stress and things. These are really important factors which are going to obviously impact your overall health and well-being in life, but also impact your weight loss progress as well. Other things might be confidence as well, or whatever really matters to you. Some of these things might be harder to measure compared to others, but if you're struggling, just put it on a scale, go in 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 0 being awful, 5 or 10 being amazing. Where do I feel this week? One key thing to do if you're doing all these other measurements, which I'd recommend that you're doing, is doing them before you step on the scale. The reason I suggest this is because people can feel like they're having a really good week, and they'll go, right, my sleep's great, my social relationships are great, and my energy levels feel top notch, my clothes feel better, my measurements are down. And if they're not actually measuring that beforehand, they can step on the scale and be in a totally different headspace if that hasn't gone down as well. So making sure that you're stepping on there with a more holistic view, more rounded view, can be really, really positive for people with their sustainability of their weight loss as well. So what now? Well, we've covered all three aspects of weight loss. So we've covered how to measure, monitor and manage your energy in, energy out, and your outcome measurements with regards to your body weight and other things you might want to measure as well. As you measure, monitor and manage these things, I'd say monitor and manage them as best you can, and if they're progressing well, just keep doing what you're doing. If things are stagnant or slow, then you might look to adjust things on the input or the energy inside or the energy outside as well, as they're going to influence the outcomes. One of the key things to probably take away from this is measuring, monitoring and managing, understanding the three parts of weight loss, which are energy in versus energy out, equals our weight outcomes, and how we can influence those things moving forward. So thank you very much for listening to this episode and this mini series on how to lose weight and everything you need to know to get to 95% of your weight loss goals. If you have any questions, queries, or would like to reach out to me, then please do. I'm at Louis Padian Nutrition, which is at LOUISPADIAN Nutrition on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all social media platforms. And I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode.